How many days in a year? This might seem like a straightforward question. But what if I were to ask, was a year on Earth also 365 days hundreds of millions of years ago? You might think, who could possibly figure that out? Surprisingly, paleobiologists have indeed unraveled this intricate puzzle. They observed a horn-like fossil in Devonian strata. This was the shell built by a creature for itself, and it secreted minerals daily, adding a new layer to its shell, thus leaving behind a growth ring. Because seawater temperatures fluctuated seasonally each year, these growth rings exhibited periodic morphological changes. Most notably, each year, its shell would grow a new arched ring. Therefore, the average number of growth rings between two arches represents the number of days in a year at that time. By meticulously counting these rings, paleontologists discovered that a Devonian year actually had 400 days. This indicates that over the past 300 million years, Earth's rotation speed has been gradually slowing down. So, what exactly was this ancient chronicler that helped us uncover Earth's ancient past? This creature, with its spiral shell and growth rings, was actually a type of coral. That's right, the appearance of early corals was vastly different from modern corals. Some paleontologists even go further, suggesting that those ancient corals might not have any familial relationship with the corals we see in the ocean today. Regardless, one point remains clear: all creatures, past and present, referred to as corals belong to a large group called Cnidaria. However, Earth's fossil record seems to systematically discriminate against cnidarians. This is because most cnidarians, like today's jellyfish, not only fail to form any hard structures within their bodies, but their very bodies are also highly degradable gelatinous substances that can decompose beyond recognition within hours of death. Often, we can only indirectly sense the elusive presence of this group from the fossils of animals that possess cnidarian organs, almost like the dark matter within the strata. Perhaps what we call coral is merely the result of some cnidarians, by chance, evolving the ability to secrete mineral shells at various intervals throughout the long geological history. Thus, like invisible specters suddenly materializing, they became recorded in the strata. This is why the origin of corals remains an unsolved mystery in academia to this day. We only know that, based solely on the fossil record, the oldest corals perhaps, maybe, possibly, appeared over 500 million years ago in the Cambrian period. However, given that today's cnidarians still share similar life cycles, we should still be able to infer some of the ancient mysteries of these creatures by observing the lifestyle of modern corals. We know that the hard structure of coral is actually just the dwelling or nest of the animal. Their true bodies are the individual polyps that reside within. If isolated and viewed independently, they resemble today's sea anemones, essentially a soft body equipped with a few tentacles to capture or filter plankton and food particles from seawater to sustain themselves, before evolving into corals. The ancestors of polyps might have squatted naked on the seabed like today's sea anemones. When encountering predators, they would contract all their muscles, shrinking into a sesame-sized fleshy lump. The pale ones might block a predator's vision, while the darker, blind-eyed ones could squeeze into crevices, finding a sliver of survival in these spots. But here's the problem: if polyps could occupy such advantageous spots, other benthic organisms could too. When it comes to one-on-one combat, I might root for you, but fast reproduction? I'd absolutely put my money on the cnidarians. After all, most cnidarians can rapidly reproduce asexually through budding. Our ancestral polyps likely relied on this trick to quickly expand their population, colonizing large surrounding areas. This made it difficult for other benthic animals to color in this part of the map. Even today, cnidarians like sea anemones still employ this strategy. Not only do their clones stay neatly together, but they also remain connected by canals, allowing them to share nutrients. Essentially, one eats, and the whole family is fed. But here's the rub: if you're all crammed together in a big cluster, still hoping predators won't notice you? That's somewhat disrespectful to the laws of nature. What's more, the crevices in a rock are ultimately limited. Most of your clones would have to cling to smoother surfaces. Then, any rogue wave that comes along could easily scatter you everywhere, the evolution of hard structures. So, what's a small, defenseless polyp to do? If they can't fight, they have to build. Conveniently, seawater is never lacking in calcium ions. Combined with the carbon dioxide produced by animal respiration, this allows them to precipitate calcium carbonate, essentially wild lime. However, as the saying goes, Rome wasn't built in a day. The earliest corals, calling them roughhouses, might even be a compliment. At best, they were crude, simply secreting rings of calcium carbonate to encircle their bodies. If one coral's home was bare, the layout of a whole colony's houses was even more unplanned. Basically just simple copy-pasting, piled together. They were pure city-states cobbled together from illegal constructions, looking like a honeycomb plate at first glance. These were known as tabulate corals. Some tabulate corals weren't even as organized as a honeycomb plate, just randomly arranged. It's like, are you guys cosplaying a drill team? Such flimsy structures would clearly collapse with a single kick. Thankfully, animals at the time generally hadn't evolved jaws yet. But this good fortune came to an end during the Ordovician period, about 470 million years ago. By then, formidable predators like sea scorpions and jawed fish had fully emerged. The seafloor was a veritable gathering of heroes, from crinoids to bryozoans, each a significant chapter in geological history. The rise of complex corals, perhaps to carve out a living in this calcium carbonate jungle built by these lime-building immortals. The first relatively complex corals appeared on the historical stage, rugose corals. Yes, the horn-like creatures mentioned at the beginning of this video are members of this family. However, their biggest innovation wasn't on the outside, but on the inside. Compared to the bare mud walls of tabulate corals, rugose corals added radial septa within their internal structures. These septa acted like slots, firmly embedding the polyps' bodies. This not only helped them withstand the impact of underwater currents but also, to some extent, hindered predators from prying them out. More importantly, the body structure of cnidarians like polyps was originally quite simple, basically like a plastic bag with an opening at the top that served as both mouth and anus. Food was ingested, digested in the stomach, and then expelled back through the mouth. This setup was acceptable for organic detritus and plankton. But what if they encountered some tough, indigestible stuff? It would just sit there, occupying space, unable to be expelled, which could easily lead to a slow, agonizing death by constipation, internal structures, and enhanced digestion. With the support of these hard structures, the polyps of rugose corals found it easier to add numerous folds and even compartments to the inner walls of their digestive cavities. This not only increased the internal surface area, boosting digestive efficiency, but also, perhaps, allowed for some initial partitioning of the digestive cavity. If one section got clogged, the others could still function. Modern sea anemones have a similar setup. This isn't just a minor improvement, it's what allows them to physically dominate many of their cnidarian relatives and even hunt larger prey like fish. Consequently, modern paleontologists often tend to reconstruct rugose corals as a type of armored sea anemone. Imagine that, a creature with high defensive attributes and added armor. In the Ordovician period, 470 million years ago, it would have been an absolute powerhouse, practically unkillable by the grim reaper of the time. As the saying goes, when poor, they huddle together, when rich, they want it all. With such advanced attributes, rugose corals naturally saw no need to huddle together for warmth like other corals. Many species became solitary, a rare trait among hard corals. Solitary survival and adaptations. With fewer mouths to feed, they could spread into previously uninhabitable flat, barren areas that tabulate corals couldn't colonize. Not to mention, being single-dwelling meant they didn't need much land. A single pebble or a piece of shell could be their foothold. From then on, corals also appeared on seabeds primarily composed of quicksand or silt. However, these bad places are often bad precisely because large amounts of sediment are constantly brought in by tides, depositing themselves heavily and quickly, capable of wiping out entire communities of benthic organisms. This is where the rugose corals we mentioned at the beginning truly shine. In classification, They are known as heliophyllum, sun corals. Their solution was incredibly simple and brutal. As long as I build fast enough, sediment deposition can't keep up with me. These corals grew at a rate that was almost visible to the naked eye, shooting upwards every minute. Fortunately, they built for themselves. They could build during the day and rest at night. This meant there was inevitably a seam between the new day's growth and the previous day's work. This is the growth ring, 1 ring per day. Furthermore, unstable muddy seabeds meant they could easily be knocked askew by ocean currents. No problem. Heliophyllum corals could continuously adjust their growth direction, ensuring their opening always grew upwards. Ancient ecosystems and extinction, in short, with this strong will to survive, corals spread across the oceans, conquering new territories over tens of millions of years. By the Devonian period, about 400 million years ago, the only creatures in the seafloor capable of competing with them were essentially just sea lilies, trilobites. Sponges, crinoids, sea stars, bivalves, cephalopods, millipedes, and various bryozoans. Indeed, throughout the entire Paleozoic era, the reef-building ecological niche was dominated by these diverse and abundant groups, but then, with a mighty roar from the Siberian supervolcano, it all came to an end. In the catastrophe known as the Permian-Triassic extinction event, approximately 250 million years ago, the global seafloor was almost completely devastated in one fell swoop. Those bizarre ancient underwater forests ultimately became echoes in the geological strata. With their extremely strong survival capabilities and lack of specific habitat requirements, heliophyllum corals naturally perished in this extinction event. While Earth's climate drastically changed, chaotic ocean currents stirred up sediment from the seabed, utterly destroying all ecosystems on the seafloor. These conditions also fueled the growth of immense numbers of microorganisms, which consumed almost all the oxygen near the seabed. Corals, unfortunately, are particularly susceptible to oxygen deprivation. In fact, at that time, almost all animals on Earth's seafloor disappeared. Even stromatolites, ancient microbial mats, once again proliferated on a large scale in the strata. Even after environmental conditions recovered, the ancient tabulate and rugose corals never reappeared in the fossil record. So, did corals truly die out then? Approximately, yes, the lineages of tabulate and rugose corals did perish. However, corals, in their broader definition, never went extinct. After all, what zoologists broadly refer to as coral is a remarkably diverse group, including many lineages that have survived continuously since the Cambrian period. For instance, octocorals, like sea fans and soft corals, are among them. However, most members of these broadly defined corals are the kind that can produce minerals, but only a little. Their presence in the geological record is sparse. And they certainly don't have much of a reef-building capability. But that's the nature of evolution. As long as there's even a slight ability to manipulate minerals, you never know when a technological leap might suddenly occur, ultimately replacing the dominance of tabulate and rugose corals. The dawn of scleractinian corals, then, about 240 million years ago, in the Middle Triassic, after the world had been without reef-building corals for 10 million years, a single coral polyp made this evolutionary leap. This was the scleractinian coral, or stony coral. In a sense, scleractinian corals are basically an upgraded fusion of tabulate and rugose corals. They possess more extensive muscle tissue than tabulate corals. And their individual coral polyps' nests are tightly integrated into a single, robust, castle-like structure. At the same time, they also feature slot-like structures similar to rugose corals, but due to their much smaller size, these slots hold the polyps even more securely, making it almost impossible for them to detach. Unfortunately, by the time stony corals emerged, the era of the seabed had changed. Across the oceans, vertebrates from land were initiating a massive return to the sea, and the rise of powerful fish predators created immense pressure on benthic life. Despite their armor, no benthic creature seemed able to withstand it. Not to mention, with the rise of various swimming predators in the upper ocean, only a minuscule amount of food was left for the seafloor. And even that meager amount was further divided by new, highly efficient scavengers like crabs and starfish. the challenge facing stony corals was a seemingly unresolvable dilemma. If they continued to stubbornly compete for the reef-building niche like their ancestors, relying solely on body hardening, they would eventually hit a ceiling and inevitably perish. If they didn't compete, they would die immediately. This situation was akin to being on the brink of death from thirst with 2 cups of water, one filled with herbicide, the other with clean water, and being asked to choose the right one. The algal partnership, stony corals, however, decisively chose both cups. That's right, in this death trap, they found an unpredicted path, becoming like plants. In shallow, sunlit waters, as long as they could photosynthesize, they could be self-sufficient. This eliminated the need to extend tentacles to catch food, allowing them to focus entirely on enhancing the defensive capabilities of their castles. Suddenly, food scarcity and predator threats were no longer a double bind. You might ask, how can animals photosynthesize without chloroplasts? Well, they invited the technology in. Their strategic partners were zooxanthellae, a type of single-celled algae capable of photosynthesis. Due to the simple structure of coral polyps, the space between their digestive cavity and epidermis is naturally devoid of complex organs, primarily filled with a gelatinous substance. Coincidentally, this gelatinous substance proved to be an ideal culture medium for zooxanthellae. At the same time, the metabolic waste products generated by the animal's life activities, inorganic salts and carbon dioxide, became their perfect fertilizer. As a result, these zooxanthellae transformed into a permanent organ within the stony coral's body. From then on, an animal primarily powered by photosynthesis stood firm on the seabed. Indeed, although stony corals retain a slight ability to predate, over 90% of their energy needs are supplied by zooxanthellae. They can truly be considered plant-like. This is why most stony corals we see today branch out, seemingly paying homage to terrestrial plants, the double-edged sword of light. However, those who effectively use light can also be harmed by it. Because corals generally live in shallow waters, the thin layer of seawater isn't enough to adequately filter out the sun's ultraviolet, UV, rays. These UV rays can not only damage the highly light-sensitive photosynthetic systems of zooxanthellae but may even harm their DNA. This is where the coral repays the zooxanthellae. Simply put, stony corals can synthesize various fluorescent proteins that convert high-energy light, such as UV light, into more benign light like red light. This not only reduces damage but also supplements photosynthetic energy. Beyond studying their sun protection mechanisms, some scientists have even realized that since these fluorescent proteins in corals can emit fluorescence, we can extract their genes and transfer them into cells, plants, and animals cultured in the laboratory. This allows us to directly observe the movement of various proteins within cells under a microscope. Indeed, this is the widely used fluorescent labeling technique in contemporary life science research. We extract and modify fluorescent proteins from corals, such as T-D-tomato, which is still found in almost every life science laboratory on Earth today. We frequently see breathtaking fluorescent fiber images in scientific news, many of which utilize these types of fluorescent proteins. It's truly like a splash of light from the ocean illuminating the world, a symbiotic success story. Out in the ocean, the partnership between corals and zooxanthellae elevated this dynamic duo to unprecedented heights. This is likely because their symbiotic relationship achieved a two-pronged, dimension-reducing strike. Simply put, while many photosynthetic organisms existed on the seabed before this, such as large algae, none, no matter how tough, could compare to the true calcium carbonate exoskeleton of stony corals. Even today, few marine animals with hard shells can truly gnaw through the stony coral's rock-like body. Furthermore, by giving up most of their mobility, stony corals' nutritional value decreased significantly, making them less appealing to carnivorous animals. On the other hand, the stable supply of nutrients and oxygen from the zooxanthellae meant that stony corals didn't need to primarily grow during seasons when food was relatively scarce, unlike most filter-feeding reef builders. As a result, they gained a larger margin of error in the growth competition, making it difficult for other organisms to overshadow them. In short, from then on, corals only needed to build limes single-mindedly and didn't have to worry about much else. Consequently, from the Middle Triassic onward, the morphology, structure, and ecological niche of most stony corals remained largely unchanged for the next 200 million years. Finally, about 66 million years ago, after a large meteorite reset Earth once again, the coral's journey faced no more oppressive obstacles. At this time, the supercontinent Pangaea split, and shallow seas spread across the world. They then advanced triumphantly, expanding their territory far and wide, becoming the absolute dominant reef-building organisms in coastal waters.